Hey, what's going on, everyone? Chris Burton back again, baddestchaplain.com. Hoping all is well with you and yours. Today, we're with my brother, Dr. Peter Watts Jr. Um, Peter Watts was born and raised in South Los Angeles. He's the current CEO and co-founder of Watts of Power Foundation. He leads a program called the Teacher Village, and this is an effort to recruit and train more Black male teachers. He has plans to also provide housing, so these teachers aren't just sort of working in the neighborhood and dipping back out, but they can actually afford to live in the neighborhoods where they teach. That's a key component of it that we're going to talk about in a little bit. He started his career more than 20 years ago in the Los Angeles Unified School District back at Compton Ave Elementary. Taught for 7 years at ICEF Public Schools. This is the founding principal of the Thurgood Marshall Middle School, which is a blended learning and project-based focus school. After being the director of blended learning at ICEF, he went on to eventually develop a comprehensive and innovative approach to education. Peter's work is renowned throughout the communities, but actually is able to serve as the advisor, one of the advisors rather, on the advisory board for Teach for America in Los Angeles. All of these accomplishments tie into his work, which is about racial justice initiatives that build bridges between faith communities and public education institutions. Peter's centered his work around the act and practice of lament, repentance, and the ongoing work that's about liberating all people from the tyranny of inequality and racism. So, brother Peter, thank you so much. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, thanks you again. Thank you for the invitation and being able to just share our story and what we're doing here in LA.
That's it. That's it. So I want to ask you to sort of take us back to the beginning of the journey. When you look at where you are, with all of your work, your accomplishments recently, uh, finished up your doctorate of theology degree. When you look at it now, is this something you always wanted to do? Or is your story one of those journeys where you're in it and somewhere along the way, like, wow, this makes sense? Like, what was your story like?
Yeah, man, this is not what I thought I would be doing with my life when I was growing up and thinking about like the future. I thought that I would be in broadcast, television, and film because I love to write and create
Yeah.
stories and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm kind of doing that work. Hey, we're on a podcast right now, and
That's a
so
fact.
it's part of that journey. But what I'm doing now, as I look back and seeing how the different pieces have come together at this moment in my life, I can see where God was like giving the breadcrumbs along the way. Growing up in Los Angeles, in South LA, with my mom and dad until about third grade when my mom left my dad, and
Hmm.
so living with a single mother who was trying to make it right,
Yeah.
and so coming in the public school system and really not being recognized for the gifts that I really
Hmm.
brought to the table, it seemed. And it wasn't because people were, being racist or anything like that. It was just that I think that just the way the education system is set up, it just does not allow for the flourishing a lot of
Hmm.
times for Black boys.
Right.
And so, going into high school, really being tracked for special ed. And
Hmm.
even though I wasn't special, I didn't have a learning disability.
Right.
I just didn't like taking tests, and so
Right.
I went to a parochial high school where you had to take a test to get in, and so I tested very low.
Yeah.
Even though the way that I thought and the way that I learned was in more of a creative way versus the
Yeah.
standard stand and deliver kind of context. And so, going into college and then graduated from college and then going into education and getting my master's in education and administration, starting a charter school, and then getting called into ministry and starting a church, and then
Mm.
realizing I wanted to know actually what I was actually preaching about. And
Yeah,
so
right.
went to school and got a second master's in theology, and then deciding, should I do a doctorate in education or should I do a doctorate in theology? And at that time, my track was really about the work that I was doing at the church.
Hmm.
And so I decided to do a doctorate in theology. But in that journey, the education bug just never left. And I've
Right.
always known that my call into the world was always at the intersection of public education and faith.
No doubt.
So here's where we find ourselves today, really in that intersection of our faith, and how it plays out in the public square,
Hmm.
specifically in public education. And so to answer your question again, no, this is not where I thought I would be. But as I sit and reflect on the way God has guided my steps, this is exactly where I needed to be.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that answer because I feel like I've said a few times, especially to folks who are just entering seminary, that if you have this sort of sense of, I know exactly where I am and where I'm supposed to be in 3 years, I'm
Hmm.
more worried for you than not. Right? It's
Right.
it's it's the folks who are like, I don't know how I end up here, but
Yep.
somehow I know God wants me to be here. I don't know for
Yep.
what, but I know I'm supposed to be here.
And I
Those are the
think for
folks, you know.
me, yeah, I think for me, going into seminary and going into a doctorate program, a doctorate in theology at Fuller, I didn't go in hoping that when I finished, I would be able to get a job at a church. That was
Right.
never my intention,
Yeah.
because the work that I was doing in ministry, I was already doing. I didn't need a doctorate to do it because I had planted a church. I'm pastoring a church, for the
Right.
past 15 years. So it wasn't that I needed a doctorate to get a job at a church,
Right.
but I just wanted to further, again, develop and hone my own leadership and the way I thought about theology and work,
Hmm.
and the impact that our faith has on how we show up in community, around justice issues that we're facing.
Absolutely. But talk to me about the way in which that sort of explanation of vocation has been received. Thinking about, when you're talking about, you know, intertwining your faith, understanding the challenges that face public education, I would imagine just a challenge I would anticipate would be sort of making that voice distinct from, voices that are sort of wanting to get rid of public school altogether and replace them with Christian schools. Like, how do
Mhm.
you sort of make your mission and your vocation distinct from folks, who, may assume that you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm a part of this. Like, no, no, I actually want nothing to do with that. I'm doing this over here.
Yep, yep. I always, when I think about that question and I reflect on why I'm in the public school sector versus private Christian sector in terms of when I do my work, I think about Sankofa. And it might
Hmm.
seem strange, but you always have to again look back, to know where you're going. And when we look back at the historic African American church and its connection to public education, we see where the black church has always been in that public education space,
Right.
whether it was K-12 education or even the development and founding of HBCUs.
Right.
We look at the black church being integral partners, in that. There was an article that I read in a blog that I wrote, that talked about the intersection of the black church and public education, and we call it prophetic activism. And so
Hmm.
when we look at the black church and we look at black preachers and black faith leaders, both men and women, these were people who were deeply embedded in the black church, whether they were pastors or elders or leaders, or whether they were just lay leaders in the pews who knew that their call was in the public education space,
Right.
especially when public education at that time was the whole separate but equal, and it was illegal to read, during slavery, or
Hmm.
it was, all these different kind of systemic things that were happening in public education. The black church stepped in and said, okay, if you aren't allowed to read here, then we're going to do a VBS, and your VBS is going to be about reading, and your
100%.
Sunday school speech is going to be about oral language skills, and
Right.
all these different things that the black church did was all about the development of next generation leaders, through kind of a public education, teaching, and learning lens. And so the work
Hmm.
that we do, even with our foundation and the teacher village, is about that work, about rebuilding the black educator pipeline, and looking at it through the lens of the black church,
Right.
and how the black church played a role in developing black public educators,
Hmm.
and the impact that it had, in the development of public education in around racial justice in that sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you're speaking, Peter, and I'm thinking about all the giants like Mary McLeod Bethune and Booker T. Washington, folks who really understood you have to be able to let Black folks get educated if we're going to be able to do the work that God has created us to do. You know.
Absolutely. And when you look at, churches around North America, black churches, big ones, small ones, there are a lot of educators in those
Yes,
spaces. They're teachers
absolutely.
and principals and district administrators, and they are all in our churches. And oftentimes, pastors and leaders of these ministries get really frustrated when it's time to start a Sunday school program or a VBS, and those teachers and educators be like, "I'm not signing up for that."
I'm tired.
I'm tired. I need a break, right? It's summertime. Don't, so you end up having, retired teachers
That's
leading
right.
vacation Bible school and stuff. So that is a challenge, but we
Yeah.
know that those people are there, and for the church, in particular, it's a great way to organize people around racial justice issues in the education space and empower these educators, these district folks and teachers and folks and parents, for that matter, and students to be able to organize around issues that they're having in those classrooms, that they're
Hmm.
having with those districts, and to be
Hmm.
able to show up in a way that says that we still have a voice in directing the way we want teaching and learning to happen for our kids.
No doubt about it. You're making me think about one of my favorite moments of the year was visiting with a church and putting my sons in their Sunday school program, and the teacher there was their teacher from school, and just
See?
the excitement on their
Yep.
face.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Because our initiative is called Teacher Village, and the
Hmm.
old African proverb: "It takes a village to raise a child." So when you think about,
Absolutely.
back in the days when teachers were living in the communities,
Right.
doctors were living in the community, and so it was all part of that village, and so there was no separation between church and state in that sense, to
Nah.
where I'm a teacher here, but I'm not going to be your teacher at church, right? It's
Right.
like it's the same people
A
who are
hundred
taking
percent.
care of one another and building that wraparound support for kids as they are going through the education system.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, when I lived in Brooklyn and was teaching, it was such a gift to be able to teach in the same community where I was working. Because you
Absolutely.
you have that sort of, the initial shock of like you don't live at the school, that the kids kind of have.
Right, right. Kids be like, "So you don't live here?" Right? The little elementary kids like, "Yeah, yeah,
Just go under the desk and like turn off your light.
right, right.
But yeah, no, it really you saw that, at least from my experience, I saw a deepen of the trust and a sense of like, oh, he's for real, like, because I think
Yep.
especially in the communities where we serve, kids are so used to a teacher being there 1 or 2 years and dipping. It's like it feels like that sort of, you know, uh, the Cheryl Lee Ralph character from Abbott Elementary, that kind of teacher that's
Hmm.
taught generations. It
Yep.
feel like a lot of those folks are retiring, especially like after COVID, and
Yeah.
so it's really hard to kind of like attract good talent and keep folks there for a long time. But something that it made me want to ask you about specifically when talking about Black men in the teacher field. For our listening audience, you may not know that less than 2% of the profession in the United States are Black male teachers. So if you look at all the teachers in the country, less than 2% of them are Black men. But research has still found that there's a profound positive impact on all students, regardless of their social location, when they have a Black man as a teacher. So my question for you, Peter, is like, what sort of unlearning do school leaders need to do in order to attract and retain Black men?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I get that question, what I have really thought about with regards to that, we, as you stated in the statistics, like 80% of the teaching profession are white women,
Hmm.
um, and then out of that number, of the whole numbers, again 2% are black men. And so I always get the question, well, why are there only 2% of black men in the teaching profession? And I say to them, because black men don't want to return to the scene of the crime.
Come
uh,
on.
And
That's a
so
fact.
and so when we
Yeah.
think about that, they be like, well, what do you mean return to that? I said, because in their K-12 experience, they were
Mm.
suspended, they were
Hmm.
expelled, they were disciplined, there was anti-blackness, anti-male blackness.
Right.
And so their school experience was horrid. And so
Hmm.
when I start having conversations with them, they're like, why would I go back to a place that I hated? Right.
Right.
So what we do with our program, Teacher Village, in recruiting, we talk to schools and school leaders and say, it's not just about recruiting, because when they find out that we are about recruiting black men into the teaching profession, all these schools start calling me and coming to
Of
me like,
course.
hey, you got a black man? I want to come to my school. And I tell them, I said, first of all, we're not Amazon. We don't
No.
have black men on conveyor belts, and
Right.
not Oprah. You get a black man, and you get a black man, and you get a black man. It's like it's not just about recruiting, but it's also about retention. What
Yeah.
does your school environment look like, feel like, to be there to retain black men once they get to your campus? So it's not
Mm.
just about recruiting; it's also about retention. So the unlearning that a lot of us have to do. One, for the teacher themselves, for the black men themselves, we work with them over the course of 2 years, and we do trauma informed care for black men. And so we help
Hmm.
them think about their own K-12 trauma,
Yes.
what happened, and help them unpack that trauma and heal from that trauma, so that when they go into the classroom, they don't perpetuate the same things that happened to them. Because believe it or not, just because you are a black male or because you are a black educator doesn't mean that you'll do right by kids either.
Oh, no, it does not.
Because sometimes we end up being our own worst enemies by
Come on.
perpetuating that same stuff. Because what ends up happening now is that it starts to be a class piece where, well, I
Right.
did it. Why can't you do it?
Come
Right.
on.
And
Come
so
on.
you start putting your middle class to upper class values
Hmm.
upon communities, saying, now you start saying, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I did. Right.
Right.
And so those are the things that we have to talk about with our own black male educators, to say, don't perpetuate those same things. And then with schools and school leaders, we start talking to them about anti-racist practices
Yeah,
that they
yeah, yeah.
need to ensure that they implement and to evaluate on themselves, to ensure that their campuses aren't seabeds of white supremacist culture.
Come on.
And so, what does that look like? It looks like the discipline policies and things that they have on their campuses, what constitute as excellence,
Hmm.
like all these kinds of things. We have them interrogate themselves to ensure that their campuses are campuses where black folks can flourish.
That's it. That's really. I love that you bring up the class piece and class dynamic of it as well, because I think there's a lot of folks who get recruited into teaching, and people are just looking at the skin, but they don't look at
Hmm.
the culture. They don't look
Hmm.
at a sense of like, you know, is this person going through some deep self hatred? I found in my own doctoral work, I had to spend time writing about the fact that you do have a sense of, if you've escaped, as you call it, the scene of the crime, that you have a deep resentment for those who haven't escaped yet.
Hmm.
You know, it's not
Hmm.
everyone who says, "Oh, I'm going to go back to this," and instead of adding a brick, I'm going to put a rope over so someone else can climb up. Not everyone has that in them. Some folks
Right.
really just don't ever want to go back, and
Right.
I think that's an important distinction.
And I don't think people really take into account the comedy sketch with Chris Rock talking about the Civil War,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And so there is a Civil War happening when you
hundred
graduate from
percent.
college and you're trying to go back, right?
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, nothing nice. So I want you to talk to me a bit about the importance of doing your work where you're from. And this is something near and dear to my heart, because I had what was one of my favorite parts of my vocational journey was being able to be a teacher in Brooklyn. Like, I've
Hmm.
relocated to Virginia now, but those years where I taught um, in Brooklyn, like living in my same community where I grew up, just
Hmm.
felt like so special to me. So, what I want to ask you is, what is it like to motivate people from your community, as well as sort of like living in that liminal space of motivating those who you grew up with, or those who are longtime neighbors in the community, as well as educating and contextualizing the work for those who are new to the community?
Yeah. So the foundation of my work that I do with Teacher Village comes from Dr. John Perkins,
Hmm.
and the whole idea of incarnational ministry.
Yes.
One of the books that I love dearly that he wrote or co-authored was "Making Neighborhoods Whole," and
Hmm.
it really talked about what does it look like, with the three R's, the whole idea of relocation, reconciliation, and redistribution of just resources.
Yes. Yes.
And so when I think about the work that I do and recruiting black men into the teaching profession and recruiting them to live in the neighborhoods where they serve, especially if they went off to college, say like to Morehouse or somewhere, and
Right.
they want to come back, and we are able to provide an opportunity or a pathway for them to come back to the neighborhood to teach and to live and to eventually become homeowners in that neighborhood.
There we
So
go.
that's kind of the our theory of change. With our organization, it's to recruit, retain, and place black men to be teachers in schools in Los Angeles, but then to eventually become homeowners in those places where they actually teach.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so our whole theory is around if we know that black men have a positive impact on the outcomes and academics of all children, especially black children and more particular black male children, then
Hmm.
we know that the schools will become better. And
Yeah.
if the schools become better, that's the first indicator of people wanting to live in a neighborhood. And so if our black
Absolutely.
men in our program can actually own real estate in those neighborhoods that are undervalued and under resourced, then when gentrification starts to rear its ugly head in the way that it does in
Hmm.
urban communities, instead of being pushed out, these black men can actually, what I would say, benefit from the changing value that they were responsible
Right.
for. In those neighborhoods. So instead of gentrification happening, we are using a term now called re-gentrification. So we're
Okay.
helping black men re-enter into the neighborhood to
Right.
benefit from the changing values of those communities.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's funny, not ha funny, but just like odd in the ways in which I joke about living in Virginia now. I meet a New York or New Yorker like every week. If I wear
Hmm.
like a Knicks jersey just to the movie theaters, I'm like, oh, you like Julius Randle? That's your man. I'm like, I didn't
Yeah,
think you were
yeah,
here. So just thinking about the way in which you talk about the whole regentrification is a powerful thing because in a lot of ways, and it's not just unique to New York or Los Angeles. Gentrification is happening in cities all across the U.S. And across the world, honestly. And
yeah. Hmm.
how do we sort of like deal with that sense of like people are going through that deep sense of grief? Like I lost home, like
Yep.
that place that I used to go to roller skate or get a good slice of pizza is
Hmm.
gone. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, the in my doctoral work in my second year, I wrote a paper called "The Theology of Place," and
Yes.
looking at place-based living with the church, but then also place-based education. Like,
Hmm.
what does it mean for educators to live in community, and for kids to live in their community and not have to commute, and how they actually can learn. About the dynamics and the cultural history of their neighborhoods and be proud of it, to be from a particular place. Uh, and
Right.
so so that's, yeah, that's a work. I can't remember the question you asked, but yeah.
No, yeah, this I think you pretty much answered it, but it's this sense of just saying, as folks grieve the loss of their
Yeah, 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 yeah,
communities.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Talking about, yeah, grieving the loss of your community. One of the challenges that, like, when we think about public education, we think about charter schools, for example.
Right.
Charter schools that go into neighborhoods and intending to do well and do good, and then charter schools close, and those kids who went to
Right.
those charter schools, they don't have a place to go back. Be like, that's my school. We're having a school reunion,
Come
versus
on.
like traditional public schools are still there, and folks from 30 years later, 40, when
Come
those
on.
schools are still there, and so
Right.
it means something. It's an institution that's there. And so what we're hoping and saying is that if we can continue to to be embedded in our communities and in our neighborhoods, those institutions that we do hold dear can be long lasting institutions, and we don't
Yes.
have to continue grieving loss of being pushed out, or those things closing or going away and being turned into multi rise buildings, or
Right.
churches being sold and destroyed and then being turned, so you have all these kind of dynamics happening, but it can be a thriving, flourishing community with institutions that are long enduring and lasting in our
Hmm.
neighborhoods, that are doing well.
Yeah, and I love this whole work because I think about just the principle of like compound interest, right? Like if you're not, and I saw all the time as a teacher, like I don't think schools benefit from just having, the longest tenured teachers like 6 years in.
Right,
That doesn't
right,
help. You
right.
need folks who have seen this come before. You and I both know how cyclical education is as a
Hmm.
field. And
Yep.
so being able to sort of benefit from that institutional knowledge, not just within the school, but within the community.
Hmm.
I mean, what you're doing has the potential to really impact generations.
Yeah, and what we and I want to be clear too. When we recruiting our young men to become teachers, we're telling them, in today's world, nobody stays a classroom teacher. Majority of people don't stay classroom teachers for 30 years like they used to.
Right, right,
We
right.
understand that, but what we are saying is that we want you to persist in the profession beyond 3 years, instead of coming in, doing your 2 year or 3 year or whatever, and then
Right.
leaving education. We're saying. Get your foundation here in the classroom. So when you decide, hey, I want to leave the classroom because I want to step in the leadership, or I want to step in and start my own nonprofit, or I want to step in and become a school board member, you at least have a good foundation of the impact that your decisions make as a leader, as a policymaker, as a CEO of an organization that comes alongside schools. You know what the impact has on people on the ground, teachers in the classrooms, kids in the classrooms, and their families.
That's really it. That's really, really it. No, I'm just so inspired by it. But I want to know, when you think back on your journey, who did you see that really inspired you, like, or even
Mhm.
like early in your profession?
Yep.
Who were you looking at and saying like, I'm taking notes. Like I don't even know them like that, but I'm taking notes.
Yeah. So the challenge is that when I was in my K-12 education, I didn't have a black male teacher until I got to, say, middle school. He was an art teacher. And then when I
Wow,
got to high school, he was the government teacher, but he was also the PE, or football
Lord,
coach.
right,
So a
right.
real like academic, core academic teacher wasn't until I got to college, and it was my math teacher. And
Wow,
so the impact that an educator had on me coming up was my college professor,
yeah.
who was the math teacher, who was Clark Banish, who's long since passed away. And we used to make fun of him because we said he was trapped in the '70s. So he would come to class. He was this weird math guy with glasses and an afro with
Yeah.
polyester bell bottoms, and he'd be coming in like, "Yeah, buddy," and he just but he had these high expectations
Love
that
it.
said, you are going to pass this class. I don't care if you think math is hard. It is not. I'm going to teach you and you're going to learn. And it was the first teacher that actually believed in me and my skills in being an intellectual,
Yes.
student. And I ended up passing this math class and doing well in math. And he had that impact on me. So when I became a teacher, I knew
Right.
the impact that I could have on kids, and so that was my desire and journey in the education space. But I will also say, we focus on Black men becoming teachers, and we say we focus on recruiting and retaining Black men and the people who love them. And
Oh yes.
so,
Talk it.
right, and
Talk it.
so it
Talk
doesn't
it.
matter if you're Black male, Black female, white, Asian, whatever. Do you love Black men and want to see them flourish? And we want you to step in and support in that way, because I would not be the teacher I am today if it wasn't for the Black women who came alongside me and
Speak
said,
it.
your bulletin board is trash.
Come
Let me
on.
come and help you put this
Yo,
bulletin board together to show you how to,
yo.
the way you are writing your objective on the board is trash. Let me
Oh
show
my
you how to
God.
write a proper objective, right? And then it was after work, we're going to go out to happy hour, and we're going to actually talk about like
That's
some
it.
real stuff that
That's
you need
it.
to make sure you do as an educator. Number one, wear your wedding ring, because when those parents come in there,
Listen,
they are trying to hit on you, and you need to make
listen.
sure you like. So those are the things that we talked about outside
Yeah,
of campus, and that was part of the village, and it was also part of why I stayed in the teaching
hundred
profession.
percent, 100%. What is it about those bulletin boards? They used to terrorize me too. My bulletin boards were trash.
Trash. Like one piece of paper on there. They're like, boy, if you do not put up student work that
Yo,
looks good and have proper borders,
telling
you know,
you, telling you, the superintendent is coming tomorrow. We need to work
right,
on this
right,
today.
exactly.
That is really it. So outside of work, how do you like to spend your time? What is
Yep.
something that keeps you going?
I spend my time with my family and traveling.
Hmm.
Traveling in the summers, or every quarter we go, go to Palm Springs or something like that. Every last Monday of the month, I go to my spa, Burke Williams, and I do a whole therapy in the morning. Then I go to the spa in the afternoon. So
Yes.
it's a whole day to myself kind of thing. And
Let's
so I
go.
try to put these rhythms, into my life to ensure that I don't burn out. So if I'm trying to help black men be healthy and be in those spaces as a healthy individual, I have to model that,
Yeah,
myself. So it's, getting therapy, even though there's no issues going on. I call it preventative work,
that's the
right?
word.
And so I do therapy once every 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
go to my spa and do the jacuzzi and massage and drink the infused water and all that kind of stuff once a month. And then we travel all the time. We get away to spend time together, my wife and I. So those are kind of things to do. And then I play with my granddaughter,
Let's go.
as well. So that's how I kind of make time for myself to make sure that I'm healthy when I show up in these spaces.
And the thing to me that I think is so powerful about it, brother, is that you're talking about self care, and I'm thinking about the generations of black men who you'd hear like, oh, grandpa he never took a day off.
Right,
Like they
right, right,
make it to
right,
60, but never took a
right,
day off. And
right.
just all these things that we had been taught is like you got to just keep pushing through. Like,
Yep,
don't go to therapy. Don't take a
yep,
vacation. Don't do this.
yep.
Don't drink water with cucumber slices in it. All these different
Right, right,
things
right, right.
that,
Yeah,
that
I think that's part of. I think that's just part of like Western culture, and more in
yes.
particular, white supremacist culture of like grind. And so
Yeah.
in the hip hop culture, it's taking it on like you got to be on your grind, grind.
Mm-hmm.
I'll sleep when I'm dead. Da, da, da,
100%.
da. Jay Z has a lyric that says, "I've never seen the back of my eyelids.
Right.
Please, I'm going to sleep." One
Please.
of the best ministries is the ministry of nap,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
And
Lord.
so I want to make sure I get my rest. I want to make sure I take time for myself again, because our bodies need rest,
You
right?
need it.
The whole idea of mimicking God in creation is Sabbath, is
The
rest. So
Sabbath.
there is a work and rest kind of rhythm that we need.
Listen, I kept playing that toward the end of my doctoral work. I would play Donald Lawrence's Hebrews 4:9. There is a rest for the people of God. I kept
That's
reminding
right.
myself, there's a
That's
rest.
right. Right.
You know,
Because, again, that whole culture of grind and no rest, that's slavery culture.
tell it. It's
That's
slavery
slavery.
culture.
It's like you don't get time to rest. You got to work,
You
work,
got
work, work,
work.
work.
What you doing?
You
Get
got to
up.
prove yourself, and you got to be like, nah, I'm not. There are three things that I hold in my life. It's one, I am not what I have. I'm not what
Mhm.
I have. I'm not what I do, and I'm not what other people think about me.
Come
And
on.
so when I hold those three things, it helps to center me down, as
Yes.
Howard Thurman says, to center down. It helps me to center down to recognize who my identity is.
100%.
It being rooted in Christ and not in what I have and what I do and what other people think about me.
That's really it. That's really it. Could you describe a time for us, a time in your life that you felt a deep sense of gratitude or just awe, like you just were in awe?
There's been many times I would say, but um, let's see. Probably when it was in the airport a couple of months ago. We started our foundation in 2017. It wasn't in 2021 where it really began to take off when we got an initial investment from New Schools Venture Fund to
Hmm.
do this Teacher Village initiative. And so, being with New Schools Venture as part of their portfolio, we got this startup grant, and it was a planning grant. We were just supposed to be planning what we were going to do. But
Yeah.
what I quickly found was that as I was doing the work and talking with other foundations for additional funding, they were like, "Hey, you haven't done anything. You got to do something in order for us to think about, investing in your work." And so instead of planning, I went into planning and pilot mode, doing a
Okay.
pilot at the same time. And so after the year was up, it was time to kind of do an impact report on the work that I did. And so we submitted our impact report to New Schools Venture Fund in hopes of getting reinvestment.
Uh huh.
And so I remember we were waiting to see if we would hear back, if we would get reinvested in. And I remember being in an airport and getting an email from New Schools Venture Fund saying, "Hey, we are really grateful for the work that you're doing with Teacher Village, and the board and decision makers have decided to reinvest with you. And usually reinvestment is just for another year, but
Yeah.
they said, we're so impressed with your work and believe in the work that you're doing so much that we're doing a multi-year investment for the next 2 years over
Come
half
on.
a million dollars." And I remember dropping my phone in the airport in Las Vegas, getting ready to
Yes.
come home, having my Subway sandwich, and and sitting there and showing my wife the email and tears coming to my
Of
eyes,
course.
and just that sense of gratitude, saying this is the first time where I truly felt somebody believed in the vision.
Right. Right.
And so much so that they were willing to invest, over $500,000
Come
in
on.
me as a person because they believed in the work that we were doing so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's something about this idea is not just in my head. I'm not just talking to people
Hmm.
who love me and like, yeah, keep going. They want to encourage
Yep.
me. Somebody who don't
Yep.
even
Yep.
know you like that. It's like, yeah, I
Yep.
want to be a part of that too.
I want to be a part of. Yep. 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 And
I'm with it.
one of the learnings I would say that I've had over the course of the year is that, and this is to encourage anybody that's listening that has an idea that God has put on your heart for you to do, your call into the world, and you've been trying to get it going. I guarantee you, it's not your idea, and it's not whether or not you have the skill set to do it. It's whether or not you have access to capital,
Yeah.
and the people who are the gatekeepers of that capital. Because what I learned along the way was that it was never about if my idea was good enough. It
Right.
was never about if I could actually do it. My The track record of my education career proved that I could do what we're doing today.
Yeah.
It was just that I didn't have access to the right people who were willing to take a chance on our venture.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And it feels like everything is about the timing of it. Like had it
Yep.
happened too early in your
Yep.
journey,
Yep.
it wouldn't have
Yep.
been right.
It's all about, and this is what I love about, like, in my doctoral work, I look at spiritual formation
Yes.
practices and things like that, and really looked at the work of Howard Thurman, and he talks about these God moments, these
Mm-hmm.
things that happen that seem they're not by happenstance, and like, but it
No.
is about like this Kairos moment in time, and
Yes.
I know for certain that that I am in a Kairos moment. Where the Lord has stepped out of time and space to come see about me in
Come on.
particular, to bless the work of my hands in this moment, because the things that are happening are not of my own effort, because now everything that I'm involved in and touch and go after turns to gold, and I
Come on.
know that's not me. I
Come on.
know it's not me, because it's the same people that I've been talking to before
This
that
whole
were like,
time.
yeah, 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 we'll wait, we'll see, right? But now
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
a
yeah.
sudden, it's just clicking and everything is just happening, and so much so that verse in the scripture that says, God will bless you so much that you won't even have room enough. Sometimes I
Come
look at
on.
the things that God's doing, and I'll be like, we don't even the blessings that are coming. We don't even have the capacity
Come on.
to even hold sometimes, and so it's just incredible. Yeah,
Yeah, no, and that's a good word. I hope that someone who's listening to it receives it and understands that word was for them. Because I felt the spirit of you talking just now. That was really it.
amen.
That's really it. I want you to imagine that you're hosting a dinner You can invite 4 guests. They can be dead or living, fictional or real people. Peter Watts, who are you bringing to this dinner?
Yeah, man, I'm bringing Ella Baker.
All right.
I'm bringing Dr. Barbara Holmes.
Uh-huh.
I'm bringing Howard Thurman.
Yes.
I'm bringing Jesus, and
Yes.
I'm bringing probably Malcolm X.
All right. All right.
And so, and all of these figures have all influenced me
Mm-hmm.
in some way, directly or indirectly. Ella Baker, for
Yeah.
example, is influential to me in the area of women.
Yes.
In the whole intersectionality piece, but just thinking about the way in which women in the Black church
Yes.
and in political movements and civil rights movements
Right.
have been key integral pieces, and how Ella Baker says, well, if they won't let me lead from the pulpit, then we'll just empower the people in the pews.
Come
Um,
on.
and so that's where I feel like the real power is, right?
Yeah.
It's not with the small people who have the positions and titles and who hold the budget strings, but it's the power is with the people in the pews, and that's why we encourage folks who are in the pews to understand what their call is into the world and let us help you equip you in that call,
Yeah.
because you're doing what the real work is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the world. And so that's why we say education is a calling, and my calling is in the field of education in the world, not so much so behind the four walls of a church.
Yeah, yeah. I hear that. I hear that. What a dynamic group you brought to dinner. I don't know. Y'all are definitely gonna talk past closing time. That's gonna be a great dinner.
Right. And I don't know if we're gonna be eating meat or pork, but
It might it
it
might it might be vegan. It might just have to
might be vegan,
have
right?
some hummus.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, man, like how can people who are listening support whether it's like Watts of Power or staying informed on the good work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think the number one, the way that you can support is go to our website at wattsofpowerfoundation.org and go to the donate button. And in that donate button, you can donate to our foundation. We are right now in the midst of a capital campaign to raise funds to build our first teacher, well, really our second teacher housing on property that we already own. We start moving our fellows into housing
Yes.
this fall. And when we're building additional housing on that same property to be able to break ground in 2024 of June,
All
and
right.
so we're raising funds right now on our capital campaign to build that housing. You can go to our website again at wattsofpowerfoundation.org. Go to Teacher Village tab, and you can read all about our foundation and about the Teacher Village and our housing. And then go to that donate button and donate. Become an ongoing supporter, one-time supporter, or ongoing supporter of our work. And then if you want to partner, you want to bring Teacher Village to your city or have that conversation, you can also contact us there at our website, or you can contact me at pwatts, WATTS, at wattsofpowerfoundation.org. I'd
There we
love to
go.
have a conversation with you to talk about how maybe your church or your ministry or your organization can partner with us in bringing Teacher Village to a city near you. And then our training, if you want to be involved in the training that we do for educators and for administrators around care, you can find more about that as well.
Awesome, awesome information, incredible work. Can't say enough good things. Peter, it's been an honor having you here on baddestchaplain.com, and blessings, brother. Sincerely.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So y'all know what it is. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts. Make sure to follow us on all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, at Baddest Chaplain, and all those spaces. Until next time, God bless you and keep you, y'all. Peace.